Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Life Burst Podcast. I am Andrew, and I just got back from the GP, and there's Tiffany playing Animal Crossing over there.
Hello.
That's Tiffany, but she's not here right now because we're going to talk about what happened in the GP for me. If you guys haven't heard yet, I got second place at the GP, which is pretty cool, but more importantly, I got the invite to the Mugen Cup, so I'll be representing America in Japan coming in February. Yeah, very cool, very cool, very cool. So I know a lot of you guys wanted to hear about like the deck techs that I did, my journey to get there, as well as like honestly see the prizing and sort of the thoughts of living vicariously through me. I've got some comments about that kind of stuff. I'm glad to do that with you guys real quick. So we're going to be doing later the top 8 interviews with the different decks that showed up in the top decks, as well as some other types of reviews on the GP later down the line. I won't spoil those surprises. But for now, we can consider this as almost my own interview. So it's going to be a little bit longer. Eventually, it will go over what I played, which is Miko. And sort of like a deep dive on how to play that deck correctly. I've been playing it quite a bit. Obviously, I did very well with it. But I want to go over the prizing first, because that's the easiest thing to get out of the way. So the first thing here is the participation prize, which I think was this mat. And this mat's actually very, very cool. I like the fact that it has zones on it. I've always liked when Wixoss has made mats with zones, because I like zones on here too. And I'm sorry if my colors are a little bit washed out. I've got to change the lighting up here because there's glare otherwise. So I prioritized making everything be seeable rather than the color temperature of this. So this is the participation prize, which I thought was a very cool one. And then we had 2 here. One's a top 16 prize, one's a top 32 prize. I can't really remember exactly which one is which. So this was one of them anyways. I really like this one. I think this art is actually quite cool. This art is very, very good for the black Tama, but then also the black Tama over here as a desaturated version that's a little echoed over here actually looks really, really nice. I'm not taking the plastic off of these yet because I think I'm going to try to sell them to someone who didn't go to the event but probably wants them. This is the other one. It says congratulations on it, so I'm going to guess that that's this. Or they both say congratulations on it. It's top 32 or top 16. This one's also very, very cool art. If you're a player of Mayu, I think this is an awesome mat to have. One of our people in our team Burstiff, which is what I was representing as well, also played this. And dude, Team Burstiff did awesome. Out of our 6 members that came to the GP, 4 were in top 8. Like, congrats to the hard work that Team Burstiff did. Let's get into all these. Yes, they were surprisingly at the bottom this whole time. So there's a lot of prizing that came out, but I want to start over here with sort of the giveaways that kind of got there. And the first one is with Tama Anon's giveaways. So this is Tama. Tama Anon always does a Tama at like the venue that like we have. So that was Tama at a slot machine, which was very cool. But then Lucky Yuki was at this event, actually, and it was very cool to meet them. I met them at MomoCon, I think is what it was, in Atlanta already, and they gave me some gifts there, and I didn't show them off, but I wanted to. And the first one is to show off of these cool, these really cool II altars that have like gold plate on them. And I think that's really cool. So if you guys want to support Lucky Yuki, you should go to their website. You should sign up for their monthly promos. They're very cool. The gold ones are very specifically cool. They also have acrylic charms and cool pins as well. So if you guys want to support Lucky Yuki, you should. And then Lucky Yuki also did specifically servants for this as the takeaway prize, just that everyone got at least 1 servant. And then if you got top 4, I believe you got another one here. And mine says number 2 because I got number 2. And that was really, it's just a cool card. It's just a very cool card to play. So those are probably collectible. It'd be cool to collect a whole servant collection at some point of Lucky Yuki stuff. This is the prize pool that I got for getting second place, which was quite cool, as well as Tiffany's prize pool added in for a little bit of dramatic effect, I suppose. I don't know if these were the participation prizes or not, or they're the top 64 prizes. We got Donna, we got Akino. I guess I should do it this way so you guys can see them a little bit easier. We got Love It, and then we got Aya, excuse me. And I think some of these are cool. I like Donna. Everyone knows that I like a good Haniel effect with a Haniel burst. So Coin Haniel, I like that one. Glad to have it. We got 2 servants each, me and Tiffany. So altogether 4 of this sort of like shield servant, which is pretty cool. I'm glad I've got a playset of those. That's kind of always what you want to do, is get a playset of like servants, right? So breaking them up's tough. I think we have 8 amoebas here, so I'll never lose to discard again. These are pretty. I like that they say congratulations on them, clearly. I don't think I don't think I'll ever put 8 in the deck, but they're here. I think this is a card that could see play post rotation against discard decks, anyways. But these are the sort of the main prizes, right? Oh yeah. And then also we got 2 aggressive knights. Not exactly a great card, but the art is cool. So if you're an art lover, this art is quite cool. Chaos is probably the more important one. This one is not Chaos. It's Countdown Heals. And Countdown Heals is going to be more relevant as a piece in the meta in just a couple months. So actually, these are actually pretty good to have as a cool altar to put into your deck that says congratulations on it. You guys know I'm a big sucker for the congratulations stuff. And speaking of being a big sucker for the congratulations, I got these promos for coming in second. I believe the differences between first and second promos were literally 1 extra copy of each of these cards. Which, I mean, if I'm getting a playset, I don't really care if I got an extra copy or not. So I'm actually thrilled that they decided that first and second place should at least have a playset, as well as these 2 acrylic trophies, I guess is what they are. We'll talk about those in a second. These are quite cool. I don't know if I'll ever use a playset of Gaylogs, but it's cool to have them. The artwork is very, very cool on them. Gaylog is one of those cards where if you're playing this sort of mid-range game, Gaylog is a very, very, very good card. I think I could probably use those stacked between a couple different other decks. Same thing with the Flaris, right? Like, normally you only ever really use 1 Flaris in a deck. It's been outshone a little bit in this Dissona meta, but that's not to say that Flaris won't come back with a vengeance, I'm sure. And having, you know, some of these congratulations ones to go across a couple different decks that I support with my locals would be kind of nice to have. The big one, though, is this Remember, right? So, like, it's 4 copies of this Remember. And, like, when you play a Remember, it's often in a playset, especially in, like, these mono-white decks that are kind of omnipresent. They always exist, which is cool to have a playset. But by far, the coolest thing that I got from my trip at Vegas probably has to be this really weird thing I got from Omega Mart. It's a spray bottle, but it's got a really long neck and it looks like a dinosaur. And honestly, what more could you want, right? Like, this is just fantastic. It was also very cool that I got second place, and I am gonna go to the Mugen Shoujo Cup, and also got these these acrylic things. It's probably what you guys really want to see. These are very cool. These are super, super cool. I'll try to get like a good shot for you guys. They're in plastic right now because I don't want to scratch them up. The inside, I did open them up once already. The inside is like kind of like this textured sticker that's on the front, and then the back side is just the acrylic, you know, with the sticker, the back end of the sticker facing upwards, so it allows to see a really cool image. But this can get scratched, so I'm a little worried about it right now. So I've got to figure out a way to store it. If you guys have any options for storing it, let me know. The cool thing is it also says, you know, like finalist here, and the difference between first and second place is it says winner, finalist. Close enough. I'm happy to get the finalist one. I don't have really many trophies, so this is actually quite cool. I was told by the head judge that these are not. I can't use them. I can't use them as actual cards. So they don't count as pieces. If you notice, they don't really have any text right here, right? They're like almost like a full art kind of thing, so they're kind of unique art in that respect. I don't have any text here on this side either, so I can't. But they did say that if I grow, I can use this as a representation of my Mayu. I can put the Mayu under it, and I can put this on top of it to show it off if I wanted to, and attack with it. So it's kind of cool to have playable trophies. Like I'm a big person who's like, the reason why I like Congrats is because they say congratulations on them while simultaneously being a good card that I want to use in my deck. That functionality with winning promos, fantastic, fantastic. Keep it up, Tommy. So these are cool. My team Burstiff, there was Rue really wants the Rue, and and one of the Mayu players who top dated really wanted my top 8, but they're mine. They're my trophies, so I'm keeping them. Put them up here for now. I guess they just shine up too much there. So that's the prizes, right? So let's talk about Miko for a second here. And some people know that I won the Komi Cup with Nanashi, and I liked Nanashi. I played a lot of Nanashi. That's also why I was good at it. But I did think that Miko was the choice. I thought Nanashi was probably the correct choice for the Komi Cup, because there's a lot of random brews that I wouldn't have known how to play against. And then for the GP, I wanted to bring Miko, because I think Miko is better than Nanashi, but you need matchup knowledge to make it better. And so that's the reason why I ended up going with Miko. Now, the big thing with Miko, and I'll set these guys up. The big thing with Miko is that you basically always... Yeah, I guess I'll leave these up here. There's 2 different ways to run a Miko list, and one of them is American Miko, where you're running a white assist and go to the top, and the other one is a is this assist type. And I think this assist type is better, just in period. I just genuinely think the red and the green support the main deck more efficiently than the white version does. The white version's got some perks to it, but really what it is basically when you're running Miko, you want to run X. Basically, X Crossfire is enough almost always to run Miko's once per game, which taxes the opponent for enter to bottom deck something with just the Crossfire. You can do that on turn 3 almost always. Turn 4 is a little bit more iffy, but that's where Love It comes in, Love It Desona. So turn 3 you can always pull off the trigger. And often turn 4, because if they pay for it, they probably lose the game on the spot. This is not a meta where you're going past turn 4. So it's actually totally fine to just basically say these 2 are enough to do it. You guys will notice that I do put my sleepies in coffins, because I think creepiness is cool. So much so, the only thing I traded for at this event was Remember's level 1s and 2 shinies, as well as Remember guards, because they all have witch hats, and I love Halloween. So I put Miko in a coffin, because I think sleepies, like, I made this very cool template. If I can show it off for a second, where it's just a transparency. So I talked with Neat, the head judge, to make sure that this was okay. The fact that it was non-destructive, the fact that I could pull it out at any point in time if someone had a question as to what I should be running or what it is, it made it so that it was okay to play. As always, I always run Halloween sleeves as my art sleeves of choice for the Elrig deck. So those are Dragon Shield art sleeves that come out every year. I like the Halloween spookiness. What can I say? Back to what I was talking about. You'll always be able to pull that off with this. So no matter what, you're in blue-red, period. Which means that you've got actually a weird color count that you have to do. With Miko, you want to run Unrest. You almost want to play Unrest on turn 2, because it helps snowball the game. You end up in this scenario where you say, do you have Xenocluster? They say no, and they pass. You probably win the game there, because you just start snowballing, they don't have cards in hand, and you win the game. If they do have Xenocluster, you still end up ahead by doing that, so it's never really wrong to do it on turn 2. So because of that, you want almost always like 18 blue in this deck, plus to run X Echo, you need a bunch of red, because it's a death sentence to not have a red in the opening hand to discard to X Echo. To the point where I was actually... cards I would normally mulligan away, if it was red, I'd be like, nah, I'm going to keep that, because I need to be able to X Echo on my turn 1. So you need 10 red cards minimum with that. So with 18, 4 guards, 22, then plus 10, that's 32. it leaves you with very few slots to mess with outside of those color counts. White, I don't like White's Elrig choices. Yuki Yuka's fine, but the 2-stop is not quite reliable, and the double 1-stop is just not where you want to be at this meta. This meta is too aggressive right now. Maybe after, because even Nashi's too aggressive, I think, to reliably pull off the 2 double 1-stop. If this meta was more Pure Luke and Miko, which it is not, then I think you probably want maybe a double 1-stop. But the other option then would be Lion, and I thought Lion was fine, but there was basically no white cards that I want to add. Maybe Exia, but I don't think Miko is an Exia deck. I think Miko wins on turn 4, maybe turn 5, and then if you don't win by then, I think you lose the game. There was often I was trying to play as a control deck, and I would lose those games. When instead I would try to play as a tempo deck, I'd win the games. So I was off of American Miko pretty quickly after figuring that out, and went full hard into Mel again. I did try to deviate from Mel. Mel was my original plan, and then tried the American stuff. Did like it. And there's 2 main reasons why. Yes, this is a 3-stop, and that's really important to have a 3-stop. It's often a 1-stop or a 2-stop against these resource destroyer decks. So it's not as great there, right? That's where it would have been better if you were in a double 1-stop lane. But against the aggro decks, it's almost always a 3-stop, which is why you run it. This is the secret sauce outside of that. Mel Revise is really important. This deck wants to hit a turn 2 double blue, and then a turn 3 double blue plus probably a green, and that's insane unless you're running Revise. Revise often ends up being this scenario where against the aggro decks you play it almost immediately, just to get more enter that they're trying to deprive you from, so you can go you can just use up your gas a little bit more, as well as make sure you hit your level 2 grow and also use Unrest. And then against the Resource Destroyer decks, you basically don't grow Mel Revise until turn 4 often, because you're holding it till they do X Crossfire, or they've already burned something off of Love It, and then you Mel Revise for probably 2 green. You just put 2 green in your enter and go. With 3 green, theoretically, I should not be able to get burned out now from being able to use an Invisible and win this game. And that's sort of like something that's important to note. I think Nanashi is easier if you don't know the meta than Miko is. I think Miko, there's 3 modes that you have to play, and you have to recognize which mode you need to be in based on the deck that you're playing against, like almost immediately, like turn 1. I don't think Nanashi has that. I think Nanashi has a little bit more wiggle room with it. I don't think Nanashi is a better deck than Miko, personally. I did lose to it, clearly. But I think I think my drive for taking first place was a little hampered by the fact that I already knew I was going to Japan. So there was some changes I could have made in my play, and I was like, that was probably would have been better. Miko itself, right, has 3 modes that it can play. It can either play aggro, where it's just really pushing damage. It can play tempo, where it's kind of interacting with the opponent but also pushing damage. And then it has this other mode where it's all in resource destruction. Like, it's just like, I'm going to win the game at my own pace, but you will have no resources, you'll have no cards in hand, you'll have no enter. And based on that alone, I will just simply win the game. That's it. It's as simple as that. I'm going to win the game. It may take for a while, but it doesn't matter because I'll just win the game. And those are the 3 modes that you go into. Now, when do you go into those modes, right? And that's sort of the key to becoming good at Miko, I think, is when you're up against hyper aggro. So we're talking about Mayus, we're talking about Onge Virtuals, we're talking about like Hanios that are double crushing all the time. I'm going to take a drink break here. That's when you want to play aggro. And it's kind of a weird aggro. You are discarding them quite a bit. Not that it's costing you enter, because I don't think that's what you do in those scenarios. But you're doing the free discard that you possibly can. Miko fans maybe even. But you are also pushing damage pretty rapidly. Miko fan has a hard time playing aggro, tempo, and resource destruction. Like, its main deck doesn't have enough flexibility to cover all three without any holes. So inevitably, one of these things you're going to be a little weaker on. And if it is your weaker one, that's where your bursts matter, because this is a burst-dependent format. So keep that in mind as I talk. But when you are playing the aggro kind of against the other aggro decks, you're destroying their hand, but you're not really focusing on their enter. In fact, you're killing their Signy because you don't really care they have enter. You can't waste time focusing on all their resources. You have to counterclock them, because if you end up if you end up messing up their hand enough that they can't open all 3 lanes, then that's 1 life you gained, and theoretically you're winning the race now. If you get a good burst and it stops the damage, now you're winning the race. You have to take advantage of that by attacking, right? And so that's important. And the deck doesn't always fall that way. To be clear, the deck that you're about to see, I didn't necessarily genre it towards that matchup to making that my strongest matchup. I think you can, but I didn't. And it kind of haunted me a little bit in this GP, but I still was able to win the matchup that it mattered in for, so it's fine. There's still ways to win it. You just need to know your outs, and my out in that scenario was Burst Well, and I did that. So that's option 1. Option 2 is Tempo. That's where you're destroying their hand, but you're also maybe messing with their enter a little bit, and you're also kind of balancing aggro. You're doing all 3. You're sort of juggling them all. You're never really discarding your opponent down to 0. You're never really getting their enter down to 0. There's might be times where you don't open up all 3 lanes. Basically, you take it turn by turn, and you figure out what is the most advantageous thing that I should be focusing my resources on, and you do those things. That is probably really good against these consistent damage decks. So we're talking about like Hanyo, as well as like Mel, Alpha, these types of decks that like will consistently open up 3 lanes but aren't necessarily doing double crush on you, or like doing like Anjas once per game plus mill you out. So those types of decks, it is good to shuffle, like kind of juggle those balls in the air and figure out what you need to do. That's probably the hardest matchup, right? Like, and not that that's the hardest matchup to win. I actually think that's the easiest matchup to win, but that's the hardest one to know exactly how you're supposed to function your deck. The last one is the Resource Destroyer matchup, which I prepped for a little bit more than maybe I should have. Realistically, maybe I should have prepped more for the Dash matchup, but it's okay. I was thinking there would be a little bit more top tables, mess my resources up. Those decks actually ended up losing to a Dash deck that Wilson was basically piloting. So I think I would have done better. I think it maybe even placed first if it was ended up existing in that. But because that anomaly came in and kind of sidetracked things, whatever. Because I'm still happy with it. So the last one's the Resource Destroyer matchups, right? I'm just kind of blindly labeling these things Resource Destroyers because they destroy your enter, they destroy your hands, they destroy your options, basically. Those matchups, you don't discard them out. you in fact don't even really do anything with their enter. You basically just let them self-implode. You try to be as resilient as you can. You draw up, you let them discard their own hand to their effects, while you maintain your own hand size and defense. Eventually, their own holes will start appearing through no fault of your own. You'll use up your own enter for a wall wolf or something, and then you trickle damage and you win with those things. I think that is the hardest one for me to do correctly, because it's just like, aside from patience, you got to also be impatient because you got to push damage at the same time. And you've got to maintain your own hand size, and you basically juggle everything, because you've got to try to make everything work, but nothing exactly works out the way that you need. And you really do need to take a burst. Like a single burst of like, oh, I get to enter charge 2 and draw 1 now, like changes what you're attacking. So it's like, it's not even turn by turn. It's like move by move. You make adjustments on those matchups. Rue and I, when we were practicing, and this is a spoiler for round 7 for us, were so into each other's mindset by the time, because he was also they were also playing a resource destroying deck that we were like seeing each other's micro expressions and changing our tactics based on that. It was one of the strangest matches I've ever had in my life. One of the more interesting ones, to be clear, though, too. So it was very cool. The last thing to note about the main deck, the Elrig deck, before I move on to the main deck, is Miko herself, right? So there's a lot of power in Miko's ability. Yes, her last ability almost always is a bottom deck something. Discard 1, draw 1, because that's what Echo allows you to do when it exceeds away. But the more interesting thing is the tax on the enter. When do you use that? And the answer is anytime that in the aggro matchup you are over destroying their hands, often that you use the tax there on that one. The tempo ones you use it 50% of the time. And then the resource destroying ones, it's like a little 50% of the time too. But like more often than you'd think is the answer, because often whatever they played is the best things in their hand, and what's in their hand after is guards or bad cards, right? And sometimes you can kind of tell the difference based on the way they're playing. That's probably not a guard, and you can tax them. And if you get away with taxing, then it just means that there's less 3-stops that'll stop you in this format down the line. All of that's actually very, very strong. It's also a way to get around Xenocluster. So for example, if you unrest on turn 2, they don't Xenocluster, you can say, cool, I'll just play Miko fans from here on out and use this tax effect, and you'll just slowly lose cards in hand, and you won't be able to get them back with Xenocluster. It's the only deck that I think can do that consistently. So, and also, still manage to discard them. So I think this is the best Elrig deck, but I don't think that was a secret going into this. I think there's a lot of people who thought Nanashi is probably better than Miko. I still don't agree with that. But, I mean, to each their own. It's one of those high-end sort of, like, choices that you can make based on that and decide whether or not you think it is the best or not. Let's do the main deck. Luckily, I kind of already split this out. So I'm going to put this out the way that I see Wixoss box often do it, which is, like, bursts on one side, and then what do you call it? Non-bursts on the other side. When I do deck building, this helps me out quite a bit to do it that way, because it lets me see like the entirety of what I'm playing with little effort, and I think that helps out a lot, so I can know if I need to switch out something versus something else. Because I don't look at my decks as single individual card choices, I look at them as packages. So for example, and this is kind of the best example I can give, I have a Rill here, right? And Rill seems like it's a one-of, so why do I like a singleton one-of Rill? The answer is I don't. I don't think Rill's that great. But Rill is a red Wawolf. It's slightly worse, but it needed to hit red counts. So that's why Rill exists, right? So it's things like that. Let's put these here, and that should do it. All right, cool. So it's all laid out. This is my deck that I took to the main deck, and I'm pretty confident to say this is probably the best main deck that you can play in Miko. I think maybe if I was going to make a change, I would take this opening signal, and I change it to a Rill. And then I think I'd be done with the deck. I have done 7 different versions of this deck in many different iterations, and each time I make kind of like what I would consider a major change because it changes the functionality of the deck. I will version it up in my Dexys link. So my last version before I went to the GP was version 7. I think this is the best thing that you can bring right now to the tables. I think this is better than Nanashi. I think this beats out literally everything in the format, with maybe the exception of dash decks. But even then, dash decks fall apart on themselves sometimes. And this deck can capitalize on. And there's some random turns where, like, nope, I just you play it against the dash, you picked up the right cards, and you win the game 100% of the time. So and that kind of happened to me in my semifinals round. So let's go over the card explanations, right? Because some of it's a little weird, and some of it's not really one-ofs. Like for example, this Millaloon is almost like Matcha number 4 in the deck. Let's start out with the offense. There's a lot of offense in this deck, and that's because Miko ends up becoming a top deck often. So your top decks need to matter. And that's why, like, you can't really run a ton, like, you've got extras, but those find another card. Matchas find another card. You can't really run a ton of dead cards, right? Like, so for example, Ivy and Yabanda are, and Miloon are probably the worst cards in the deck in terms of those top deck turns, because you end up with a level 2 that does nothing. And that's not great for you. But they're important enough for the mid game that you kind of need to include them anyways. But the impact cards are the things that open up lanes or deal damage, right? And we have 4 Firecracker, 2 Wildwolf, 1 Rill, 1 Opening Signal, and then Bang, and then 4 Love It. That's a lot of lane opening in the deck. And in fact, if you want to look at Emergence, because Emergence is... I don't think I enter charged off of Emergence once in the GP. Emergence is just a, let me spend an enter to get something for my enter to my hand. So Emergence is negative on your enter, but positive on your card, not your card advantage, but your card filtering. So Emergence could basically be another thing. I liked this amount of removal. This felt correct for me. I felt like I always was able to open up 3, except for maybe the last turns, where I draw my 2, and it's based on whatever it is on the top. But a lot of the times, 50% of the time, it ended up being a Love It or a Firecracker. I could open a lane and then end the game. So I think that this is the right amount of opening. Some previous versions I had more bangs. Some previous versions I actually took bang out altogether because I didn't see enough Exia, and I found ways around Exia that I was like, if I just find ways around Exia, I don't need the Exia counter. I can just play around Exia. And Midoriko became a real deck that a lot of people, I think, were testing. I think Midoriko is a very good deck. And suddenly I was like, alright, I should have at least one of Bang. This is a true one of in this deck to get myself out of those situations. So if I'm in a scenario where I see a deck that's like Mito Oodles, like I played in the Creamy Cup, I'll make sure I conserve the Bang. Or if it's something else like Exia, right, or Midoriko, yeah, I'll make sure I have a Bang. And I can conserve it, right? Those decks aren't necessarily discarding me down, so I should be fine. The other portion of this deck is sort of resource management, and then the other portion of the deck is actually what I'm going to just call air. So, like I was saying, some of this is just like air, where it like fills itself in. Those cards specifically are Matcha, as well as Emergence, right? These are just like, this gets you closer to guards or closer to Miko fans. Emergence can get you the Miko fans. The burst is really nice against these like rush decks that exist in the format. So I like these as just consistency options, because Miko like lacks, like for real. It does lack these things. I wish there's a little bit better ways to draw cards, and there is Tamago, but I can't really fit any more level 3s into this deck. Like every game basically is you want to turn 2 Miko fan, both of them, if you can. Or sorry, turn 3, Miko fan. Then turn 4, you're usually Miko fan and Love It. And then turn 5 is either Love It, or Love It, Bang. So there's just really no point in time where you actually can statistically put the, you can put the Tamago out, and I had an earlier version where I even had like 2 or 3 Tamagos. The answer to that was the 3 Yabandas to get myself into that late game. But then this becomes a very bad top deck later down the line. But that actually transitions us pretty nicely into the third part of the deck, which is the resource juggling. And that can be your opponent's resources, or it can be your resources, right? So Miko fan juggles your opponent's resources. Very strong. The Miko trigger itself, it's the only card where if you play literally both of these, you're discarding your opponent 4 in one turn, right? It makes up for the fact that you don't have to discard heavily in the early game. And then after that, you can start taxing, because the opponent will never have guards, basically, is the way that works. Miloon is just, is not, I suppose you could say this is a resource card, but it never really was. It taxed 1 spell in the entirety of the GP. And in all my practicing, even when I had like 3 like Miloons, it taxed like 2 spells throughout the months of my testing. And that's because it's just a level 2 with a burst that I needed to fill out burst slots. Like, theoretically, I would have preferred it to be a 4th Matcha. But I needed more level 2s to avoid Anj stuff, some amount of dash stuff, and definitely Nanashi stuff, because viruses can't kill them very easily. So that's the reason for that one. The other resource stuff is, again, like I said, Yabanda helps you draw cards, and often you draw cards in the mid game to help your final turns, because you need to have the card advantage early to snowball it into the late game. You don't get card advantage in the late game. IVs are good in those like Anj matchups, like I was saying. You want to put them out so you can get some more resources, because the game's not going to be very long, so you need more resources if possible. And then Pond Turtle, right? Pond Turtle's the weird one. No one was gonna convince me that I needed to be on 4 Pond Turtle. The correct answer is 3. It might even be 2, which I know is strange. Everyone loves a monument. But the answer is Pond Turtle's specifically really good in these aggro matchups and terrible in the resource matchups, or even the long game matchups. Basically, putting your own hand down to try to get your opponent's hand down, especially when you're running Miko fans, it's just a mistake. You can get your opponent's hand to 0 by the time it starts mattering. The early game, getting the opponent's hand down to 0 is not the game that you necessarily need to play. If people are using Pond Turtle against you as a Miko fan, or as a Miko player, you're winning the game, because they're putting their hand down for you for free, and then you can just focus on refilling your hand. Overall, I think this deck is very, very strong. I think it's incredibly strong. Like I said, the only change I would make is potentially one more Rill there. I'm not saying Rill is a good card, by the way. I'm just saying it's the card. It worked for the counts that I need. Dissona is actually, like, the main deck Dissona stuff, not all very good. Like, a lot of them are just like patch jobs, because some of them are very good and the pieces are very good. So you play some less good cards to make it work. I think this deck was maybe a little weaker to Dash than I'd like it to be. If I wanted to be stronger versus Dash, I probably would have played another Matcha, maybe another Emergence, something like that, or whatever, to make that work. Maybe another Emergence here, and then something else, like that or something, and kind of move things around. Overall, I think this deck is really strong. I would play it again. I'm really proud of the deck accomplishment here. I really want to give a shout out to all my my team members who helped me through this. Team Burstiff. We really got together and focused down the meta and found the best version of everything, I think. So that's probably why we ended up with four people in the top 8, which is pretty crazy. The last thing I got to talk about is my matchups, my matches. So I'll go ahead and actually I'll leave this as is, and I'll just talk to you from here. So my matches were basically as follows. I've got the best Coast apps up so that I can look at it. Round 1, I went up against a Hanyo that had Mill on it. I think that's the right Hanyo. I don't think Sunspot Hanyo is correct right now anyways. I think it might be good later down the line. And Hanyo with Mill is scary, because it's basically like a consistent damage deck that also can double as a dash deck if it needs to be. And that's what Tiffany brought, for example. And it was good. But I was able to cleanly navigate my way, because I played against that matchup enough to know that I just got to discard them down and wait for a burst to do its job. It did its job, and then I capitalized on the window opening. I was able to attack the opponent with no guards in hand. They had like 3 cards left in hand. But I was like, yeah, if they don't have a guard, I win here, but I also keep up Mel Invisible Enter. So I shouldn't lose the game anyways, and yeah, it ended up being that way. Then this round 2 was a weird one. I had camera jitters, so I'm really not gonna love when Fire asks me to potentially commentate that one. But my opponent, this was their first GP. They were a good player, and I made a pretty crucial mistake. I should have Xenoclustered, so that way I could have followed it up with the Unrest and win the game from there, basically. And I didn't Xenocluster, and I had a level 2 in hand and a level 2 in hand. And I was like, I just need to draw level 1, so it shouldn't be too hard. I've seen a fair amount of level 3s based on the things I was discarding and drawing through. So I went for it, but the new version of my deck had more emergences than I was used to. Originally, I was used to basically 0 emergences. So I thought I hit those, and then instead I drew spells. I went, nope, I don't hit those. and I was like, I'm gonna lose now. But I did some wacky plays, took back some wacky plays. Luckily, I didn't give any new information, so I was good. Knew any beneficial information, anyways. So because I just kind of spiraled for a second. I got my own breath back and realized, like, okay, the only way you win this is they make a mistake and you have good bursts. Inevitably, my break came when they had, because I wasn't pushing a lot of damage, there was no reason for them to grow their L-rigs. And because they didn't grow their assists, they actually weren't able to make limit on a turn. I think they may have misjudged that. And then because it was a free open lane that I didn't need to spend anything for, plus they discarded stuff on the field, like they already trashed things. It ended up being kind of the resources that I would have gained for Unrest was given to me. So, okay, we're at parity now, so if I get a good burst, I should be good. I bursted well that game too. But I left the board open to take early bursts because I knew I needed to snowball to win after that. And because I took the early damage and because it helped me get back in the game, I was able to inevitably catch back up and win for what should have been a death sentence. So sometimes you play to those outs. They're not guaranteed, so you don't like playing to them, but you do. It wasn't my favorite game to win, but you take the wins where you can get them. My turn 3 or my third round was against a mirror, and I think they were playing well, but what ended up happening was I had 3 Abandas basically in my opening hand and like 1 Ivy, and I thought that I engineer a turn where I'm able to basically, if I'm the first one to unrest, which is not guaranteed. I was going second on almost all of my games, which I would have preferred to go first, but there's a lot of people who scream that going first is like literally the way to win this format. I managed to 6-1 going second almost entirely, so it is it's possible. But I had a lot of level 2s that gave me resources, and in the Miko matchup specifically, the one who's able to crush your opponent's resources first wins. There's 2 ways to do that. A, you crush your opponent's resources, or B, right, you crush your opponent's resources, or B, you gain resources. And I was able to do both. So I very cleanly won the game based on that. Like that's what I was saying. This deck is attack a little bit more towards these resource destroyer decks. So I was pretty confident I could win that one even on going second. The next matchup was against a burst diff teammate, Sirloin Sealed, who got second place in the last GP with Sachet. They were running Mayu, and that's a pretty scary matchup. This is one of the first times I think the only time in the tournament I got to go first outside of my finals matches, and I went second. No, I still went second for this one, and I didn't love going second, but they seem to think that that going second is advantageous towards the Mayu player, so maybe it worked out better that way. Either way, the way that it worked was that I kind of figured the way to win against that is to race them, and they often are dependent on mill damage to sort of carry them into the final attacky turn of the Mayu. And so I didn't grow my level 3 X Crossfire, level 2 Crossfire on turn 2 defense like I normally do. I think this deck incredibly benefits from a 3-3-1 split, right? Having the Miko fan out on turn 3, I think is incredible across the board to help Snowball win these games. But that matchup specifically was the one time I basically didn't. And it paid off. I had 2 cards left in my deck by the point that I would have milled out. I had 0 life cloth, so it was fine. And I did win the game on 0 life cloth. So it was as close as it possibly could be. I think they're a good enough player that if they maneuvered their turns a little bit different, I think it would have hurt me more. But then I also think I might have made other decisions. So I think it was pretty strongly in my favor, knowing that one specific trick. After that, still undefeated, which is awesome. Going into round 5 undefeated. This is like where I'm like, cool, everything's great. I am going into round 5. I play against a very strange rogue deck, which is a Mew deck. And I don't really know how the Mew deck runs. Like, it's a bit of a... I know it does negative 3,000, so theoretically everything that I play against Nanashi should also be the same here. But they might be more enter-intensive than Nanashi, and they might be less good at filtering than Nanashi. So I played to basically those outs, and inevitably it was, right? They do negative 3,000s, and they also milled you out. So it ended up being pretty close to the same. Like, it was a good win on my end. Eventually, I got them out of cards. They couldn't fill fields, and then I won the game with that. I felt really good about that win. Going into round 6, 5-0 means that I have potentially... I should have theoretically locked top 8 at that point, even if I 5-2. I would probably be at the bottom of top 8, which is fine. It's still top 8, right? So I was pretty happy going into it, but Wilson and Wilson's Ange was almost like the boogeyman of the GP, I think, and I didn't feel great about that matchup. Like I said, I think this deck is a little weaker towards specifically Dash, but I was confident that Dash was just not going to do well over 7 rounds, and was eventually going to fall apart on itself, which it kind of did in the finals, so it still did kind of do that, but not until my round, right? Not until round 7. So one round a little late. So I got this weird hand where I couldn't do early damage, and because I couldn't do early damage, I had to focus more on my own defense, so I ended up not growing on my turn 3 because I needed the enter to defend with, and that ended up being the right choice. And there's still a world where I won that game because I enter charged 2 guards. Like, I had Ivy out and I enter charged a guard, but I also had a Yabanda out. So it was like one of those turns I was like, enter charge first. Oh, it's a guard. Okay, I'll draw a card. It's not a card. And then the following turn I went, all right, this time I'll Yabanda first. And I drew a card and it wasn't a guard. And then I was like, enter. And then I entered a guard. So there's no way to win that. I can't do that win. But so it ended up being fine. I lost the game. I still think if I had early damage, I probably could have won. If I got those guards, I also think I might have been able to win. Either way, it was my first loss. Sad me. I also, it was kind of important because that means no matter what, I'm lower in seeding than them, and literally the only matchup that I'm like, I really do want to go first in is against Ange. Like, I think going first matters quite a bit against Ange, and I couldn't go first, so that was depressing. The next one was against Rue, and the cool thing with my Rue matchup was that, like, we've played each other so much that we're in each other's heads before we even start, and because of that, it was this really unique game of Wixoss that I think I've never played with anyone else, where we're metagaming against each other's micro-expressions and things, and often making the right choices there, too. So we ended up in this, like, incredibly tight resource-exchanging game where the break came where I was able to discard them down a little bit, and then they didn't draw the right collection of cards, and I won. But it was genuinely, I wish it was recorded. It was a very good game with a very good friend of mine, so I'm happy to have it. And it was only for seeding. Like, at that point, we both made top 8, so it was just a really good game to have. Following that, we ended up in our finals, right? In our quarterfinals, semifinals, final game, right? And spoilers, I got to the finals. Mine was up against specifically Akadilin next, I believe. Yeah, Akadilin next. And this was a bit of a not a controversial game, but it was a tough pill swallowed game. What ended up happening was they're really great players. They've been watching the channel from the beginning, and they've been learning and getting better and better and better. So I was thrilled to see them in top 8, and shout outs to them for that. They played a little quickly, and it's almost like I don't think you would know the difference between playing, you know, your first rounds and then your top 8 GP rounds are very different. You have to play the top 8 GP rounds doing almost like paranoia level of, like, explaining on the board. Like, I would do things where I would go to my level 3 of my Miko, and I would say, going into the attack step, if I was choosing, it's easy to say discard a card, please. But the tax is kind of weird to say, because you gotta pay now. It's a colorless. What card do they not to get to draw after the first card? Like, what is the wake up? So like, I have to say things like, I am going to my attack phase, Miko trigger. I'm going to choose I'm taxing your next draw. So you can either pay 1 now, and you can draw both cards normally on your attack phase, or you can not pay the enter, and then on your draw phase, you will only draw a single card instead of 2. Right? I think I even said attack phase there, which would have been wrong. So you have to, like, paranoia level explain things, right? And often there are judges there as well. So if they catch you, they'll say something, and you can't get multiple infractions for that kind of thing. So they were moving pretty fast. We missed a trigger, and I was like, we can't move that fast. We can't miss those triggers. And then on the final turns, where it really did matter, bursts and hand number count, they played a Anne, and then I had a Miko fan token on the field, and I make sure to always have the token, give them to the opponent, so that way they can look at it and read it. And on it does say the opponent owns the effect, not me. I don't own it. So Anne doesn't trigger and draw you a card, but they did draw a card and look at it. And I had to call the judge over because it was known information. Now you can make life cloth choices based on that. You can make guard choices based on that. And we were at the pivotal moments of the game. So inevitably a round loss was issued. We played out the rest of the game, and I would have lost the game. So it's kind of a little controversial in that end of the spectrum. But playing at a GP, there's a certain tight level of play that you need to do, especially at the higher end, that is skills that are beyond just playing the game well, that I think is a learning experience. I personally did that last GP when I didn't call a judge over to look at my opponent and make sure they were moving reasonably fast, and I went to a double game loss that cost me the top 8. This time around, I called judges 5 times throughout my thing. Even on simple things where my opponent asked me, hey, does this card blank your opening signal effect? And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to tell you that information because it's like I can mislead you, or if I say something wrong, the judge will rule in a weird way. So I'm just going to call the judge over, and the judge can explain the cards to you. And that's like the right way to do these things. So yeah, it was not my favorite win, but I did move to quarterfinals. Now semifinals. And semifinals was again against Wilson's Ange deck. And I got the worst seeding, so I'm not going first. So I did the stupid thing where I even had a pep talk with my life cloth before we even went to the first attack phase. And I looked at my 7th life cloth over here at the top, and I said, you've got to do your job. You've got to pull your weight. You've got to stop a damage. Because these games against Ange, if I'm going second, I know from experience, I lose if the following 2 conditions don't happen. If I don't stop a damage on first attack, and if I don't stop a damage on second turn's attack. If both of those don't happen, I lose the game. Without fail. It ended up being that I was able to do that. My bursts were there. And there was also a moment where I was milled out on turn 3. Now, I think that may have been a mistake. Milling me out on turn 3 allowed me to look through my entire deck, see what life cloths were remaining, what bursts were remaining, and I counted and I found that I had 4 bursts remaining out of my 5 cloth that I was going to have. And inevitably one of those bursts went away, so it would have been 3 out of 4 left, which is still a ton, to be clear. But I'm not good at this part. I had to mentally add into my head that I had an emergence, an extra, a servant, and a Miko fan as my bursts. Depending on where they are, they could be really good for me. If the emergence burst happens while they do their first attacks, I need to make sure I have a firecracker in there so I can block 2 lanes, right? If it's the extra burst, This is better on the final turn when they decide to go swing for double damage or swing for Chigusa damage. Not double damage, excuse me, because the double damage would still go through, but I would at least save 1 damage. If it's the freeze, I need this to trigger on turn 2, right? So that way their turn 3 is awkward. Their turn 3 doesn't matter, right? Inevitably, it did fall that this emergence went away. So my easy win was gone. And I had an opening signal, right? That was maybe it wasn't a servant, it was an opening signal. Got it, understood. It was an opening signal. I didn't know where the opening signal was and ended up in a scenario where I did freeze the Elrig on turn 2, which was great. But that wasn't part of the burst math. It was I knew I had an extra and an opening signal. I did not know which order it was, right? So if the opening signal happened during the Chigusa swing, final turns, then I win the game anyways, 100% of the time, because I don't take enough damage to lose. However, if it was opposite, right, I needed to make sure that basically the way that it worked is I needed to make sure that this extra was hit, and that's the opening signal doesn't get me the game win 100% of the time. The extra, though, does. So it ended up being, because I had the knowledge of that, I was able to grow my Mel for only 1 damage to prevent 1 damage to ensure I hit the extra, and then I lock up the game and I win all my crackback. So once I kind of got into that scenario where I was like that, I was like, oh, I think I have this locked. I was able to lock in there and get it, right? It was a pretty aggravating win, I think, because it did allow me to get into 2nd place at least. I clinched up the invite. But honestly, I'm glad I had the bursts there. I think I would need to go first without the bursts in order to win that game. But like that's kind of the issue with running a dash deck too, is that you end up in a scenario where your opponent's burst could just end your game, and you're not exactly in the driver's seat for those things. So I think it was inevitable to happen at some point with sort of dash decks. But so it ended up being great for me. I got there. I had this moment of zen, which was fantastic, where like the end of it happened. Not really a ton of people were watching us because it was pretty late at that point. A lot of people were just like kind of in their own thing or playing like draft or something. So my team was already kind of off in the distance, hanging out, and like I did I literally, before I picked up my cards, they were like, all right, we got to move to finals, and I was like, you got to give me 1 minute to celebrate. I was like, judges, can I have 2 minutes? And they were like, yeah, sure. So I like left my cards and I walked over to my team and Tiffany, and I was like, your boy is making it to Japan, and like everyone exploded at that point and like started cheering, and it was the most, like, it was so euphoric to just be like, I was working for this for months, and guys, I was literally 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. for like almost every day without fail with my team, constantly working towards this goal. And so to see that it's finally happening, right? I got first at the Kumi Cup and then second at this thing. To see that I'm finally breaking this top 8 to be a consistent top 4 player is really, really, really rewarding on my end. Like, it's good to see, and I encourage anyone else to kind of have that same journey. It's fantastic. I didn't think I was going to do this. I'm older. I'm 30. So I know that's not old, but like it's a little older in terms of card years to become like a good card player. So I'm just excited I had the chance to finally get there. That was the best part of the night for sure. The finals was just going to be cherry on top. I got to talk to Brandon. I've never talked to him before. He's a really great player. He was on Nanashi. And basically got the whole like, okay, look, so like you and me, we're tested for Japanese meta now. We're the test group for this because we got to do Team America. And like we had a fun game. I didn't put much pressure on myself to win. Like I said, the prizing wasn't that much difference, and my goal was to get the invitation. So I lost it. I think I overextended a little bit, and because of that, I didn't have the cards in hand to finish the game. I looked at my top 2. If I had 2 more cards in hand, or even 1 more, I think I could have won the game. But it was difficult. So, and also, you know, it just didn't work out. The card draw didn't work out for me. But that's how this works. This format is really burst dependent, really card draw dependent. So like, there are variants in it exists. I think the difference between me and maybe some other players is I really embrace the variants. Like I was like, if this happens, I'm not gonna get it, not gonna tilt it over it, not gonna get mad to it, gonna play towards it, right? That's why I added the immersions with the firecrackers to be like, we're playing towards the variance that happens here. And it worked. There were times where I needed that variance to win, and it's what happened. So, you know, you played Herd Zero Outs, and eventually you get there. So I'm happy with my performance. There was a few things that I think I could have cleaned up. My round 2 for sure I could have cleaned up. My Nanashi games, I think I could have had a little bit more reps in them. That's my fault for not having exactly those amount of reps in it. Outside of that, I think I did really well. I think I knew how my deck was supposed to function, and I knew how the matchups were supposed to go into me. So I was very excited about that. Again, shouts out to the Burst Diff group, specifically Rue, Emmy, Sirloin Sealed, Tiffany, and Jimmy. You guys were all really, really, really great at training at all points in times. We're even now talking about, like, what do we do for the next GP? So it was really great to be with all those guys. I cannot stress enough how important it is to have a training group and how much better the GP is if you have a group of friends to do it with. That's my GP report. We'll do more stuff later on some cool like extras that we're gonna put out. There's gonna be interviews coming out. I don't want to spoil anything, but there'll be more coming from the channel from that. Now that I'm done this, I gotta do some GP prep where I'm using arts now. So who knows? Maybe I'll run like a survival training arc of like me learning Japanese meta and maybe even learning Japanese. So yeah, it'll be fun, guys. The truth is, may you always flip a life burst, and we'll see you on the next video.